Good afternoon. And welcome to Georgia DNR's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm Emily Wingo, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Floodplain Unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen-only mode, so please make sure your mic is muted. If you're having any Wi-Fi issues, you may want to turn off your camera and any other programs that may be running. Please make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for the communication, as we will not be taking questions by audio. Isabel Rogers of Dewberry is monitoring the chat along with Aaron Kyle, and will try to help you with any technical matters. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during this session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Please be sure to use the radio buttons when responding to poll questions, either in the pop-up window or the chat box. A survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video on georgiadfirm.com. With that, let's get started. Today's presentation, Lessons Learned from the 1994 Flood. Our presenters are John Hudgens and Brian Shown. Unfortunately, Chief Doyle Welch with the City of Bainbridge was unable to join us. John Hudgens is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army Reserve and a retired City of Albany engineer. During the 94 flood, John was called to active service and the first representative from the Corps of Engineers in Albany. Since 2015, John has been mentoring with the FirstInspires.org robotics program in Albany. Brian Shown currently is a professional engineer with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Floodplain Unit. During the 1994 flood, Brian served as the engineer for Lee County, conducting damage assessments and permitting of structures impacted by the flood. And with that, I'll now turn it over to both of our gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, let's make sure I'm clicking the right one. All right. Yep, got my big screen. All right, recollections or lessons learned about the little disaster we had in 1994, July through long time afterwards. Was call it the Alberto disaster. Doesn't go well with hurricane or anything like that. It was a big disaster for Lee County. We had over 500 homes flooded, with only about 100 of those homes in the special flood hazard area. Most of the adjacent counties were impacted. So as far as getting help from outside or neighboring counties to help do things, everybody was in the same boat, so to speak. We had flood levels. We had new maps, had just come out in 1990, I believe. That was a few years before I showed up there. I'd only been the county engineer for a year when this flood happened. And we had flood levels running 6 to 12 feet above what was on our maps. And then we had a lot of roads cut. We did have 2 roads that weren't cut. We had one bridge on US 19. It survived. It was up very tall, very high. Only one creek flowed under it, so that was good. We had another road that it was big and flat, and the water just sloshed right over it. Didn't bother the road, didn't bother the bridge. And the water eased off of that, and everybody was able to drive down the road afterwards. So those became, but they did close our route over that particular road, small state route. It remained open for a long time, but the US 19, they did close the bridge, but they were able to quickly reopen it as time went on, while the flood was still up. We do have what happened or what people did. So here's a disaster. Everybody's running around. Houses flooded. It was a lot of time that I just could sit there and watch the water flowing by. There wasn't much to do as long as the water was up. But once that water receded back, people charged back in to start working on their homes. And there was a bit of problems going with problems. How to put it? People were upset at not getting information about what they needed to do, where they needed to get information. And I'm rambling a little bit. Getting information out of FEMA was hard back in 94, just as it is hard today. And there was fewer hoops to go through back in 94. But we had people saying, we want to build back as quick as possible. I was told by the county administration and commission to not enforce the flood ordinance. They complained to the county commission, said we were holding them up or not holding them up. It didn't make any difference. They said, just cut loose, build back. We're not going to enforce building codes or anything. Just throw the rules out the door. Lots of people would say, or a fair number would say, we don't want any help. We'll just build back and we'll pay all the stuff out. They didn't have any flood insurance. So they were just going to build back the way they wanted to do it. We had folks who would make a quick repair, then sold the house. The mold would show up a year later, and the mold is not covered in flood insurance, in the NFIP flood insurance. It's not covered, so it became the cost of the new homeowner. Had a fair number of houses, since they were gutted, had water up to the rafters or over the roof of the house, past the eaves. People said, yeah, let's remodel the house or add on to the houses. So there was a large number of those folks who wanted to go along, because we had the Small Business Administration did come down and said, okay, we'll give you a low interest loan to rebuild. Since you didn't have flood insurance, we'll give you a loan. Well, the interest rate on that loan was like half of the current interest rate of the time of regular commercial stuff. So people, I know of one person, they were able to pay off their existing loan, almost double the size of the house addition, and the payment was going to be smaller than what they were paying before, as far as the loan goes. So, and buy flood insurance on top of that. So there was a fair number of wanting to expand or make changes. So that was added into, if we'll have substantial damage improvement stuff. Also, there was a whole bunch of people said, oh, it's the worst storm possible. It won't ever happen again. 3 years later, about a third of the houses flooded. 3 years later, it was a different kind of storm that came in. It did rain in Albany and Lee County for that 3 years, and folks were pushed back out of houses again. Problems I had to deal with was the commissioners didn't know the rules. The administration didn't know the rules. For one instance, I said, FEMA ain't going to like this. They want you to enforce the building rules. And it was one day the county commission chairman walked by my office and said, yep, you're right. And he kept right on walking. And it was like a day or two later, I found out what I was actually right about, which was enforce the rules. You got to do it. So we had to figure out quickly jump down to that substantial damage determination. Very quickly had to come up with all the information needed for that. Other things to keep up with was folks, some of our employees, their homes were flooded. Well, they got to do their job and do and still work for the county. Could you get to your flood data? Was it flooded out? Well, for my instance, no, it wasn't. It was sitting up high and dry. We dealt with paper more than, or spreadsheets more than computers. And we had the data available, except we actually had to go out and get the data on the houses. We knew where they were, but we didn't know much about them. So tax records and other information like that was all paper driven. And then you've got the people who weren't affected by the flood at all. And they were saying, where's our permits? Where's our reviews? Not so much for the Alberto disaster, but I know in for the 2009 flood, there was a fair number in the Atlanta area. They just kept right on chugging, didn't phase them a bit. And they said, what flood? Thinking about stuff. Certainly the substantial damage, big ticket item now with FEMA. You got to have a plan. You got to run through the plan. Big floods, you need a lot of people or know where all your stuff is. Keeping up with a lot of pre-knowledge of what's going on. You got to worry about that. One, say, major thing in the county, we didn't have this much trouble, was people building back without permits. It's a difference of 94 and 2009, or rural Georgia area, people more likely to get permits than people in the Atlanta metro area. So when I got to DeKalb County and asked, did they have a upsurge of permits? They said no. We just sat around and waited for people to ask for permits, and there weren't that many people asking for permits. So depending on where you are, you might have a whole bunch of people that will just rebuild back, which brings up, well, that'll be down the road. So here's the substantial damage. You read the book about it, you look at stuff, you talk to FEMA. It's pretty simple how to do it. I just grabbed this one off the internet. It says, you're looking for a lost item. And then said, did you find it? Nope. Do you need it? Nope. Well, forget about it then. So it's real straightforward on what you need to do. But in reality, it's a mess. There's lots of little caveats this way and that way and up and down and roundabout. And it's a mess. What it is. And you're trying to track down everything. And then on top of that, you've got 500 homeowners wanting to know whether or not they can build back or not. They're hunting around for contractors to do stuff and do it themselves or buy materials, stuff like that. They're wanting to go, go, go. And you got to have it all figured out as you go along. So in the rebuilding side of things, some thoughts about how to keep things to keep up with. Drawbacks to the flood. You would think if you had a big flood, people would remember when it occurred, where it occurred, who was impacted, that kind of stuff. But generally people start forgetting about a flood, especially if they weren't directly impacted. They were not flooded. If they had to, let's see, I know Procter and Gamble had a big facility, still does, down in Albany. And for a while, the folks to get across the river from west to east had to drive up into Lee County, take US 19, and then take another road, got which one, to get up to US 280 to cross over at Cordele and then come back down again. So it was like a 3-hour drive for a 15-minute drive to get to work. Yep, they may remember that for a while or forget about it, but you got about 5 years, and they start forgetting about it. The same works with the commissioners. In a couple of years, they'll start saying no more money for flood relief. We need to move on with running the business, especially if the only people that flooded were next to the river. People on the other side of town, no, they weren't impacted about stuff. So people forget about it. Also, if you have the big storm and they saw a little bit of water running by in the creek, they'll say, we had a 1,000-year flood and didn't bother me. And why do I have to follow all these rules? Well, it just didn't flood where you lived. It flooded other locations. So it's a bit of a problem with the news saying, what year storm was it? Well, whenever the Corps or USGS says a storm event, they are talking about one particular gauge, one particular location. They're not talking about the whole thing. So 6 to 12 feet above the 100. So at different locations in Lee County, we were running well above 500 because that's generally about a foot above the 100-year. So we were running well above that in everything, but we had some locations, 10,000-year storm, well over 500-year storm. The number I remember from a gauge, I think it was Highway 32, don't remember, going going east out of Lee County into Worth County. That gauge, they estimated it out to be in about a 350-year event, but that's on the Flint River. It wasn't on the two that actually flooded a large portion of Lee County. So yeah, we had it bad. Everybody kind of knew about it, but people start forgetting things. Another problem that comes along is, let's see, is the federal procedures take like 4 years or more just to get projects going. Now you're bumping into the commission forgetting about stuff. You're bumping into the people forgetting about when the flood occurred. Why isn't this project moving faster, going slower? Buyouts of houses and stuff like that. Well, if you got to live someplace, you got to repair your house to live in it and then turn around and sell it when the buyout comes. And that takes years to go by. And you're just, the homeowners are just sitting there waiting. So you've got problems like that going on. And then you've got the poor overworked personnel. I remember working weekends. I remember working 12-hour days to get through everything, to keep up with stuff and people streaming in and out. And it just wears on you, especially with the bigger floods, wider territorial flood kind of stuff. It just wears on you. I mean, I feel really sorry for the folks down in Florida. that it's just wears you out. And so the workers have a tendency to go. And if the workers that worked the flood who turned in the applications to get federal help pack up and go, that knowledge is gone. Now the federal people ask, they might ask for more information on something and you don't know where it is. So on the rebuilding side, it's a mess of doing stuff. Now, if you have plans for all of this, you work out plans and you kind of informing everybody it'll take this much time and things. The buyouts, as wonderful as they are, they're just not fast. And hopefully we'll be able to figure out, Congress will figure out some way to make that faster as we go along. But it'd be great if it acted like insurance. Pay out, get them out of the house. You buy the house and you're just chugging right along on there. I must have missed something or I took out one of my slides. Well, just on the, anyway, that was the end. People will get out and try to fix things. If you have floods in different places, I really like this one, even though we say, don't walk around in the flood water. Don't clean out drains. We have to go and rescue you from doing stuff. So on the FEMA side or the emergency management side, they say stay out. But I don't listen. I'll go and clean out the grates. I'll be one of those people out there trying to get the water to get on deck. So that's just a quick overview about a disaster. Big disaster, little disaster, it's about the same stuff. You'll just have, on a little disaster, you'll have more of your regular business to deal with. And on a big disaster, it's just time consuming watching what people go through, especially if you're not flooded. If you are flooded, well, you actually need to find another house or elevate up. Do something to where it doesn't bother you. Watch out where you live. Big importance. So I will stop sharing and hand it over to John or back to Isabel.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Okay. It is really funny that what you said and what I titled mine is never going to happen. Brian is absolutely right that the people primarily at the top they forget. And I was involved with the Corps of Engineers from 79 to 94 in emergency management. And at the first of that time, we were still playing war games because of the communist situation in Europe. And every time we had a war game, each department that participated, and it was supposed to be the whole Corps, they sent the lowest man that they could find. The people that really were in charge never came, and that's the same way that it happens in the counties everywhere. The people that need to be there, that are going to make the decision, are not going to participate. So you really need a written plan. As Brian said, people leave. You need a plan that when all those people are gone, this is what we need to do. And with that, I'm going to start in on the part that took a different approach. I tracked the storm and all, and I'll just start with that. Because, as Brian said, it didn't rain. Yesterday was Monday, July the 4th, 1994. A beautiful, uneventful day. I live just inside Lee County on the northwest side of Albany. I'm a construction project manager and have an ongoing project in Cuthbert, Georgia. In order to better understand the flooding in Albany, the flood timing needs to be identified by drainage basins. You will understand. Tuesday morning, I head northwest up 82 towards Dawson, which is 24 miles, and Sasser, which is only 12.2 miles from Albany. Between Sasser and Dawson, the very upper part of the Chickasaw-Hatchie Creek crosses 82 heading southwest. This is the only part of the Chickasaw-Hatchie in Itchaway east of 82. At this location, the Chickasaw-Hatchie Creek is overtopping the road. Another vehicle goes to the water. I follow, arriving in Dawson, where US 82 turns west towards Cuthbert. State Patrol are stopping everybody and telling them that 82 is closed due to flooding on the Itchaway-Notchaway Creek. Time is 9 o'clock Tuesday morning the 5th. I turned around and headed back to Albany, arriving back at the Chickasaw-Hatchie Creek. I entered the water. I was moving slowly to prevent a wake, and then I felt the car float and lose traction. So I slowed down, continued for a short time, then it broke loose again, and I know you don't turn around, but I did move to the center of the road to take advantage of the crown. This basin does not cause any flooding in Albany and does not enter the Flint River until way below Newton, Georgia. The sun is shining all day in Albany, Georgia. As Brian said, we didn't get any rain from the flood. We got flooding. Now, I'm going to address what caused the flooding. To understand the flooding, we also need to understand the action of the weather system Alberto that caused the flooding. The system never became a hurricane, but just a low pressure system that did not possess any high winds. It came ashore July the 3rd near Destin with no anticipation of any weather-related issues in Georgia. The flooding west of Albany was attributed to rain from the east side of that low. Tuesday, July the 5th, evening local news forecast did not see anything for Albany. At this time, it had not been identified that a blocking high pressure was forming that would prevent Alberto from moving out of the area. The blocking high pushed Alberto back into Alabama. Alberta finally dissipated it on the 7th. Beginning on the 5th, recorded rain near Americus was 27.85 inches, of which 24 inches fell in the first 24 hours. Because of that, there were over 20 deaths that first day from the flood. Remember, this is 1994, the state of the art of weather forecasting at the time. Albany is affected by two drainage basins. The western basin is composed of the Kitchafuni and the Muckley Creek, and the other basin is the Flint River. The only flooding, well, from the Kitchafuni and Muckley Basin happened just near, starting at Lake Chehaw. There is a drainage ditch, and this drainage ditch was put in to move water from an area that did not have an outfall. From Lake Chehaw on the west side of the railroad tracks in Albany is a drainage ditch that runs under the 1982 bypass. The ditch heads southwest and turns more westerly on the north of Aberdeen Parkway and south of the hospital. The ditch terminated east of Palmyra Road and is piped to a lift station over at 11th and Harding. The ditch to Slappy Drive piped under Slappy west for 0.45 miles and ditched again southwesterly and terminated at Willow Lake at the intersection of 3rd and Dawson Road. Dawson Road is the crown between the basins. And we actually tried, because of the failure of the pump stations, the houses in the western part there had water in them for over 2 weeks. We did try to relieve that a little bit with a small line pumping over Dawson Road and heading, moving the water into a basin that went to the southwest. All right, returning now to the Muckley, small elevation differences in Lee is the same situation in Dougherty County. Therefore, the areas that were a few feet above the creek, those houses flooded, including areas on both sides of Flema Road and US 19 and Lover's Lane, which is basically right there at Lake Chehaw. Just north of the Flema Road there is where the two creeks come together, and flowing southwest to a dam that was installed years ago, and it was also electrical generation plants. Sometime in the future, they erected a 6/10 mile earthen dam between that location and a point on the Flint River and built a new power plant on the Flint River. This dam joined the two water bodies to share a pool, so boats were able to go from one basin to the other. Continuing now in the Flint Basin, after realizing what was about to happen, both Chris Power and Georgia Power made the biggest strategic move of the flood. Both companies opened all the gates at both dams. When Lake Blackshear Dam broke, I was called to come to the city manager's office. In a panic, he wanted to know what and when to expect the flood. When I said nothing, he thought I didn't know what I was talking about. Then I explained, because the pool level below the dam was close to the elevations of the pool above the dam, there would be no flash flood. Then I said, it's just going to take a longer time for the lake to pass Albany. Then when the Georgia Power Dam broke, it just added more time to the water. Back to the flooding on the Flint. First thing on the east side to flood was the old Turner Field golf course and an abandoned hospital. The flood plain is not very wide through downtown. This is because the rocky riverbed is the uppermost point of navigation. Continuing on down the east side of the river, there was a drainage ditch that serviced Shackelford Park area just to the north of the bridge, Broad Avenue Bridge. South of Oglethorpe is Albany State College, which is built in what I would call a floodplain area, but also old US 19 was located there. To protect both, a levee was constructed to the west of them. However, the flood overtopped the levee. Continuing on south at Oak Ridge, just north of Oak Ridge, is a drainage ditch that runs east to accept a force main that removes storm water from a large area to the east. The station was flooded and the water backed up. The river at Oglethorpe was flooded on both sides of the river, and the bridge was unusable, as Brian said. We actually, when the river came up, it was actually hitting the bottom side of the Broad Avenue Bridge and the Broad Avenue, Oglethorpe, and Oak Ridge Bridge. So all three of those bridges were closed. And at the very first time, we had to go all the way up to Montezuma to get to the other side. Coming on down, after Albany State, is the Marine Corps ditch, which is a drainage structure that drains the western portion of the base. Water backed up this ditch and flooded US 19 just south of Moultrie Road. The famous attraction Radium Springs flooded, and the water was 8 feet above the entrance, which is street level for old US 19. The reason I know that is I was in a flat bottom boat and we rode by the old casino there. As far as that, I have no knowledge really of what transpired south of the springs. Coming down the west side of the river, the 8th Avenue Basin is designed as a combination sewer. The way it is built, I believe that it was the first attempt to provide separation and treatment. Once it reaches the river south of US 19 and 82 bypass, it runs down the riverbank all the way to below Oglethorpe Boulevard. At that point along the way, at points along the way, the bottom is semicircular and carries the dry weather sanitary flow. Above this is an opening on the riverside that will allow discharge of anything above what the bottom can carry. However, the openings are not big enough to discharge all of it, depending upon the volume flow. The city has an active permit for this operation. However, they have been mandated to increase the treatment to 85% of the city sanitary discharge, and the city is currently actively working on that mandate. The backup in the system occurred at Booker Alley, south of the train station. This was a brick sewer that was over 100 years old. The brick changes to lime under the railroad tracks to the sewer. Minor flooding also occurred in the rail yard just to the north of the station, but it did not hamper the trains from using the yard. South of Oglethorpe is a storm sewer discharge point. Water backed up through this line, causing flooding inside of the Civic Center, and also flooded Oglethorpe Avenue. Just south of the Civic Center it topped the banks, the west bank, and completely flooded the cemeteries. Moving southwest away from the river, all the area toward the river is covered by water. Pretty much the area east of Newton Road was flooded. North of Oak Ridge again, a small area flooded west of Newton, but did not cross Slappy Drive. The further south I know about is at the Albany Airport. There's a low point in Newton Road between Oak Ridge and the airport terminal that flooded. At this point, the water backed up across the road into a small holding pond at this point on the airport property. The flood crested in Albany late afternoon, July the 7th, but it was going to be a long time before the river would ever get back to normal. And that is my remembrance. And I worked with the Corps until October. The Corps came in and built trailer parks for all the people that were dislocated. That area in the south part of just east of Newton Road and the river. Okay, I'll give it back to you, Emily, or whoever wants to take it next.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I'm just fascinated with how much the water just, that you had no idea this flooding was really coming because you had none of the rainfall. Um, so I'm kind of curious, the National Weather Service started sending out information to all the communities along the Flint saying this is how high the water is going to get. And of course, in Bainbridge, it didn't get as high as had been projected. What was the kind of communications that you had with the Weather Service on, when was the flood going to actually hit and where was it going to peak? And this is to both you and Brian. John.
Okay. Um, the when I put on my uniform and I went to the city, they gave me a bag phone. Remember, this is 1994. It was useless. The few cell phone lines were always just, you couldn't get through. People in Atlanta were going crazy because I wasn't reporting. I couldn't. I was stymied because I couldn't communicate with any. So I certainly couldn't get anything from the weather people. It's I don't know what Brian was able to get in reference to Lee County, but nobody, like I said, anticipated any of this.
And I seem to recall, I know you said you didn't really go further south than a certain point in Albany. But I seem to recall that Newton, that's just downstream, was so inundated, even their courthouse for the county had been just flooded out. And of course, they lost a lot. And that they had about 197 buyouts down there. How did future flooding encourage or discourage people from doing any of the buyouts?
Um, a lot of people did accept the buyouts, but I do remember, and I don't, but up on the just above the dam, the at Albany on the Flint, there was one person that ultimately refused the buyout. And the thing of it is that's bad about this was not the first time that that house had flooded. So it must have been really, really low.
Wow.
So, but a lot of people did accept the buyout. That's the only thing that I can say uh, about buyouts. The, but I was not involved actively with that part. As Brian said, somebody else is handling things, and they're gone, and they. But you're very correct about down in Newton. They were terribly inundated by the flood, uh, both in the town and actually above the town. Was a catfish farm that got flooded, and all those catfish ended up in the river.
Oopsie. Oopsie. Well, Brian, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, on our buyout side, because I did handle that for Lee County, we had very few people even, we put out notes, and we had very few people ask about it. We had one person, yes, they would like to be bought out, very low house. But our problem ran into back in 1994 was tax assessor data was primarily used just to get the revenue in. As far as estimating what the value of the houses were and the land was, not real good. It was just something to generate funds for. But since the state of Georgia has passed rules about getting more accurate, detailed information about sale of house and land, then that problem doesn't exist. But the FEMA folks said, well, use tax assessor data. Tax assessor data said that house was worth about $75,000. And based on sales in the area, it would be $150,000. And I just could not get FEMA to move up to the 150 level where they would have sold the house. But they said stick to tax assessor. So having good sales information or tax assessor data, it's a lot better now. But very few people, certainly mobile homes and things like that, those were replaced with brand new units there. But very few people in Lee County wanted to be bought out because they didn't believe it'd happen again. But it did, or at least flood came in. And there is one area, let's see if I can pull it up real quick. I could show you the area. Get to Google Map here real quick. Maps. Benny, Georgia. Albany, being sure we get the right phrasing of where'd it
All
go?
right. While you do that, if everyone that's still enjoying all of this, stick around as he's pulling this up. But please put your name and email in the chat if you're looking for credits for your CFM. We're going to also entertain any other questions if you'll put that in the chat along with your email so that we can follow up with you. Make sure that you mark your calendar be sure to put your email in if you're looking for CFMs credits.
Right there.
And thank you.
Yep.
And,
Emily, would you like me to do the poll?
oh, I'm sorry.
Poll
Yes,
question?
we do need the poll question. I completely forgot about that. Yeah.
I'll steal back the share. Really
which I'll let you have it.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I completely forgot about the poll question. If everyone would also please remember to answer the poll question. Alberto, the storm that caused the historic flooding events in Georgia in 94, is classified as a hurricane. True or false?
So if you'd like to receive 1 hour of CFM continuing education credit, please answer the poll question. You can answer using the buttons in the pop-up on the screen. And if the poll does not appear as a pop-up, then please check the chat. You may also have to type your answer in the chat if the poll does not appear there. We'll give just a few moments for everyone to review and answer the poll question.
While they're still working on that, I'll show you this little spot in Lee County. Except I don't share. There I go. Just for reference, I lived right up here. There's a little spot next to a radio tower. And this is our Kitchafuni Creek that flooded. All of this was underwater up to this edge, which wasn't built, and it flooded down through here. But this is Creekside Drive area that flooded twice. A lot of buyouts occurred after the second flood. So we're looking at acre lots out through here. Some people didn't sell, but others did. So acre lot, acre lot, acre lot, acre, acre, acre. So anybody living out there now, except for these people over here, you've got about 4 acres around you. That is city, county-owned land all around. So the second flood, oh yeah, we're getting out of here. But the first one, all of these people could have been picked up, certainly down along the creek, which is surprising. All the people along the creek said, no, we don't want to sell. So you're just going up through the creek there. So the bend, the big bend here, where the water definitely started coming across the end, had one person build to the rules. His wife had moved into the house and he wasn't there yet. He was a traveling superintendent, construction superintendent. Built well above the flood elevation, thought everything was be fine. They got 6 inches of water in the floor of their house. They were built up high. So they were 7 feet above the flood elevation, and they were in this corner. And they just got enough water into the house that messed up all of their antique furniture legs. Really a bad mess. So, and hadn't moved in. We had another person, no doubt. I remember where all the people lived. I don't remember any names. There was a person that moved in here. They moved in the day, and then that night they were rescued by boat.
Ouch.
To come out. So
Also, I
we
think
had-
we have a
we had
question.
folks there.
Yes. Yes.
Paulus has his hand raised.
Paulus, nice to have you here. We could take him off mute, maybe let him speak instead of type.
Paulus, I think you're on mute, just FYI.
He might not be able to unmute. We're waiting. Let's let him type. Or maybe he doesn't know his hand's up, but Paulus Brown was the state floodplain coordinator at the time. So whether you wait for that or not, I'll just stop sharing.
Okay. If you don't mind putting the code up for everyone to be able to get the code so we can have folks answer the survey questions and remind them that our next webinar will be scheduled for January 14th. So please mark your calendars.
So tomorrow. Oh, yep, there we go.
Yep. There you go.
All right.
I just put the survey link in the chat so everyone can access it through there. And then also, I just sent another link where you can register for the January 14th Lunch and Learn. So both of those links are in the chat for everyone.
Well, I appreciate this. It is really helped open my eyes with some of the history and how sometimes we learn and sometimes we don't. Thank you again for everyone for attending today's presentation. If you have not done so already, please be sure your name and email are in the chat. Again, next webinar will be January 14th. Don't forget to fill out those surveys. You do help us with planning these things out. And if there's nothing else, this concludes our Lunch and Learn webinar. Thank you so much.